H is for the head of product at Congregate. A is Aaron Bannon, that's his name. T is for the talk he's gonna give. E, it's everything he hates. Aaron.
How do you follow that up? I don't even know. So my name is Aaron Bannon. Thanks for coming out. Today we're going to talk about everything I hate about mobile user acquisition. And my guess is I'm not the only one who hates things about mobile user acquisition. So a little bit about me. I work for Congregate. We are a web platform for games. And we also do mobile publishing. I work on the mobile side. You can see me up in the upper left-hand corner playing Towerfall, which is quite possibly the best multiplayer experience in games that you can have on a console that's been released since Halo. Probably is more a reflection of myself than anything else. Awesome game, fun. A little bit about us, open platform on the web, also do mobile publishing. My responsibilities are focused on the live operations of our games. How do we get traffic in, how those games actually make money, and how do we make sure that we have profitable partnerships with our developers. Right now we don't have any games internationally released, which means I do nothing, right? No. So we're really excited about releasing 2 games coming up in the next month, and we'll have a lot more being released throughout the end of the year. Before Congregate, here are some of Congregate's partners. And before Congregate, I used to work at Gree. Get it? It's a giant Japanese monster. Scott, you're right. Tough crowd, man. Hey! So Gree was a great time. I worked on games like Modern War, Kingdom Age, Crime City. And before, I started at Gree basically by way of Funzio, got hired at Funzio. And then before that, I worked for a company called W3I, which is now known as NativeX. And they're an ad network based in Minneapolis-ish, north of Minneapolis. So basically, when I talk about user acquisition, I've seen it from a lot of different angles. I've seen it from an ad network perspective and a small publisher perspective, and I've also seen it from a very, very large company with very, very big budgets perspective. And what I want to talk about today is just some of the principles and some of the things that, about the ecosystem that frustrate me, and we all have those, right? So the first thing that Aaron hates about mobile user acquisition is when people talk about it in terms of getting installs. Okay, so user acquisition isn't about getting installs, it's about acquiring users. And so often our focus is just on, I want the install. We don't think about what it means to actually get a user into the game. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about not just the marketing and how to get a user into your game, but also about the early part of the process in the game to keep the user around and actually activate that user. Another key thing is we're looking at building a long-term business. We're not looking at a short-term perspective. I like to think about mobile games in terms of years. How many years is this game going to be active? And likewise, I think about mobile acquisition as how do I get a user and get them to stick around for years, not just a day or a week. So Aaron really hates it when developers complain about CPI costs. Bluntly put, you don't have a CPI problem, you have an LTV problem, right? It's our responsibility as a business to generate enough revenue so we can actually do the marketing in order to afford, get the users and make the margin. That's where the business comes down to. LTV minus CPI, that's your profit. Ted Turner once said, early to bed, early to rise, work like hell and advertise, right? The key thing is advertise. Like advertisement is not an option. So that's one of the issues that I work a lot with our developers is basically how do we increase those LTVs to make it profitable in order to grow the business. Aaron hates when your UA budget is too low. So obviously we talk about, CPI, we can't complain that they're too high, but likewise we have to have the ammunition and we have to have the budgets in order to run CPI with a big enough budget. Once again, UA is not an option. It's part of the business. We need to plan for it from the beginning. And this is another area where getting partners to help out can be very advantageous, especially for smaller developers. The key here ultimately is ROI positive buying. So one of the great parts is that in marketing, if you're getting ROI positive, then every dollar you spend on marketing actually results in $1.50 or whatever in terms of profit. So it only makes sense to increase your budget more and more and more because that's just more and more profit. So one thing that really kind of irks me about the ecosystem right now is the postback being underutilized. The postback is an amazing opportunity to transfer data between the network and the advertiser, and no one puts enough information there. There are two things I really, really would love to see in the postback is the price of how much did I pay, and also the publisher ID, who showed this to me. So really quick, just to define the postback, when you show the advertisement, there's a confirmation URL that gets passed back and forth, and in that URL you can put attributes about the data, some metadata in there. And in there, I just want price, right? And what really annoys me is you go to ad networks and you're like, well, can you put price in the postback? And they all say the same thing. Well, not all of them, but most of them say, oh, we're technically not set up to do that. Which is complete bullshit, because they are. They wouldn't show your advertisement unless they knew what your bid price was in the first place. It doesn't take much work to just pass that along in the postback and give it to me, and then I can put it in my database, sum it up, and I can have real-time reporting of knowing how much I'm spending to the hour or to the minute. Not too much to ask, right? Sorry, soapbox. I love Attribution Partners. So Attribution Partners, guys like HasOffers, AdX, Coachava, to me are one of the greatest things to happen to the ecosystem in basically the past 18 months. Ad networks have a really bad habit of sometimes charging you multiple times for the same user. Attribution Partners help combat that, right? They decide who the user is and who actually brought them in and who gets awarded for that install. And pretty much every ad network now works with them because the entire industry is really focusing on them. One of the downside of Attribution Partners is the tracking issues. It takes so much work to get the tracking issues, working and actually everything smoothed out. So it's hard for me to actually activate a new network in, say, 15 minutes, partly because I have to take a couple days to go back and forth between the network, the attribution partner, and myself to make sure all the URLs are set up, everything's being sent right, everything's unlocked right. So it adds a lot of headache and a lot of overhead from the beginning. One of the things that really annoys me is ad networks and advertisers have almost polar opposite goals. So if you think about from an advertiser, my goal is to get the best quality traffic at the lowest price, right? The ad network is simply reselling that traffic. They want to give me the cheapest traffic with the highest markup. So there's this dance that you play back and forth with ad networks of saying they'll send you over traffic at the price that you're bidding, and then you're like, no, this is shit traffic, I need something better. And then you kind of get in this price negotiation and all that stuff. So ultimately, ad networks are incentivized with buying the cheapest traffic possible, marking it up the highest, right? Which just is annoying because you have to pay extra close attention to your traffic quality, and it can change every week or every month with an ad network. Sometimes they get kind of short-sighted and they're like, oh, we're missing our volume targets, so we're going to throw in some bad traffic in order to hit our volume targets, and then your traffic goes off the rails, and you have to call them up and be like, why the fuck did you do that? You have bad traffic now, I'm going to cut my spend. And it's like, we shouldn't be having that conversation. I really wish ad networks would all offer something. So when networks have nothing to offer, there's no reason to use them. And ultimately, networks can provide value in two ways. First of all, they have a proprietary publisher base, right? They have a direct relationship with whoever is showing the ad. The other possible way that they can add value is tech. How do they actually connect you, the advertiser, to the advertisements, either in terms of self-service, real-time bidding, or any of these tech issues. Ultimately, when an ad network doesn't have either the publisher base directly or tech, they're not adding value, they're just taking up space in the ecosystem. All they're doing is just buying traffic from some place and reselling it to you, be it from a DSP or another ad network, which means that you can always go to that place more or less directly and buy it without the markup. So it doesn't make sense when they're not offering anything. Blindly buying traffic in bulk. So when we buy traffic, we basically go out and say, I want X amount of installs, and I want it at this CPI or this CPC, cost per install or cost per click, or maybe cost per engagement. But it doesn't make sense because bids should be done at the margin. I should be bidding just higher than the person. The second highest bid. I should always be a penny over the second highest bid, right? So when I'm blindly bidding, let's say I go out and bid $4, but the next highest bid is $1. I'm bidding 4x over the next person, right? No one's going to tell me that I'm bidding 4x over the next person because both the ad networks and the publishers, they love the fact that I'm bidding 4x because they're making that margin. So the more that bids can be done at the margin, so as each thing comes up and there's a real-time process for bidding and an auction, the better off we are with getting our spend being more efficient. Aaron hates when ad networks are not self-service. So it blows my mind that we're in like 2013 and I still have to talk to like 5 different people from an ad network between like their BD person, their account executive, and their ad ops team in order just to get up and running. Like, why can't I just spend 15 minutes, go to your website, upload the asset, and then it will automatically deploy and I can start optimizing it accordingly? Why do I have to spend so much time talking to people? This really ultimately gets really annoying when you have problems, especially like on weekends or holidays, and you can't get a hold of anybody at the ad network. Ultimately, my business is 24/7. Like it can't stop, right? And if I have a lot of money on the line, I want to make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. So if you're going to, as an ad network, require me to talk to someone, then that person should be available 24/7. And there's no such thing as vacation, weekend, or anything like that. Because when I have a problem, it has to be solved right away. If it's self-service, I can take care of it. So I don't know why ad networks aren't actually all pushing for this really heavily right now. I really hate it when people say they can't afford good creative. Ultimately, good creative pays for itself. If you have a $100K marketing budget and you double your CTR, right? You just doubled the effectiveness of your entire marketing budget. Surely you can afford $10,000 for really kick-ass creative, right? Focus on the creative. The better your creative, the better the performance, and invest in it. One of the things that really annoys me is there's no fountain for perfect users, right? There's really this mythical idea of a perfect user for a game, or the place that gives you only the perfect users for the game that have like infinite retention and the best monetization possible. Ultimately, no two sources are the same, and sources come down to like publisher, the individual publisher, ad networks can work differently, and all these different variables. What's good for one game and a publishing source that's good for one game may be completely wrong for the next game, right? If I have Candy Crush, it's not going to make sense to advertise something like Rage of Bahamut to the same type of user, right? Ultimately, the only way to really know this is to try them all and then measure your ROI on each one of them and try different experiments with them. You have to keep at it. You have to keep trying. And then if the ROI is good, double down. If the ROI is bad, get out. Aaron hates in-sent traffic. Like, I hate in-sent traffic. Like, it is like it just annoys the hell out of me, right? I have on more than one occasion gone over to a UA person with not nice things to say when my day one retention drops off, right? So in-sent traffic it tends to bounce immediately, all right? They tend to come in, grab their incent, and leave right away. Our LTVs tend to be between 1 and 25% of a normal user, right? So it's not that I'm completely opposed to ever having incent traffic. It's just that my bid is going to reflect that. And right now, on most incent networks that I've seen, you simply can't win the traffic by buying on what's actually, from my perspective, profitable. Maybe that's just my game, perfectly fine. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to rely on incent traffic very much at all. I hate being distanced from the publisher. Publishers, the person showing the ad, right, is the publisher. The person with the advertisement is the advertiser. That publisher is the most important part of the chain because they're the ones that actually have the one-to-one face-to-face interaction with with the traffic, right? And each one of those publishers represents a certain type of user. And I need to be able to optimize based upon that publisher. Likewise, going back to that postback idea, networks really need to send back to me which publisher they're using, so I can be able to optimize that and say, hey, this publisher is good, let's ramp it up. This publisher is bad, let's cut it off. When they start mixing publishers together, or like buying from a DSP, and they're just like, okay, this is one DSP, but that DSP can represent like 8,000 different publishers, it's not worth, you can't optimize based on that. You need to know the specific publisher every time. I hate focusing too much on demographics. So demographics, don't get me wrong, demographics can be important, but they're one way to describe the user, right? There are lots of different ways we can describe users, and demographics is one of them. Ultimately, once again, our focus is on users themselves, not what, the way we describe those users are just ways that we can, triangulate and find the quote-unquote perfect fountain of users. Good targeting obviously increases your probability of finding good users, and we use demographics for that, but there's a lot of other tools that we can do in order to target. So, which leads me to something I love, Facebook for mobile user acquisition. Yay! For 4 very, very important reasons. First of all, you have direct access to the publishing source. Facebook, their users, they are the publisher for their users, right? So you have direct access there. You have hyper-targeting, right? You can go in for demographics. You can go in for likes and and any other characteristic you can think of with the user and do hyper-targeting, and have different bid prices accordingly, which is great, right? It's self-service. I can set up a Facebook advertisement really, really easily, and I don't have to talk to anyone, which is great. And it also has real-time bidding. So I'm only bidding a penny higher than the next highest bid. I'm not actually reaching my max bid every time. Obviously, if my max bid isn't high enough, someone else wins it, which is fine. But Aaron loves Facebook for that. Aaron hates Facebook's 28-day look-back window for attribution. It's exceptionally large, 28 days. Like, I'm used to like 48, maybe 72 hours, and Facebook wants 28 days? Absurd. So when I actually get into the game, and I'm actually playing the game, I really hate waiting more than 3 seconds to play the game. Don't have a loading screen in your Fatui. Your binary should have everything set up for the player to play the game immediately. You should not be stopping the game or stopping the flow in order to load assets. Load them in the background is really, really key. Another thing I really hate, and I see this happen occasionally, especially with smaller indie publishers that are focused on monetization with advertising, is I'll get an offer as soon as I launch the game. So I'm going to the game developer and saying, hey, you're worth my time. I'm going to invest my time in your product. And the first thing you say to me with an offer when upon launching the game is, actually, no, your time isn't well spent here. You should go spend time over there. Doesn't make sense to me at all. Don't put advertising when you launch the game. You want to keep people playing your game. I hate when I can't download the game over 3G, right? Keep that binary below 50 megabytes. There's really no reason that you can't get it below 50 megabytes. It just takes creativity. It's amazing how many games out there that have their initial binary under 50 megabytes, but after a month, all of a sudden, their footprint on your iPad takes up a gig, right? It's because they're loading in the background. So load those assets in the background. Don't be blocked by that 3D 50 megabyte limit. Oh, once again, when you're loading in the background, no loading screens allowed. All in the background. Aaron hates reading in the Fatui. One of my coworkers says this should just say Aaron hates reading, which he's right. But especially reading in the Fatui. I came to play a game. I didn't come to read a novel, right? Keep your sentences, keep your text boxes really short, one sentence at a time. Don't overload me with stuff to read. A lot of it's because I'm too lazy, but that's why I'm playing a game, right? Because I'm lazy and I want to have fun. Aaron hates when we just focus on tutorial completion rate. So metrics are tricky. You can never use just one metric. You have to balance between multiple metrics. A tutorial completion rate is helpful, but it's helpful in telling you how many people completed the tutorial, right? Which doesn't really make sense. I like to look at tutorial completion rate in conjunction with engagement into other mechanics within the game. Did people engage in mechanic A? Did people engage in mechanic B? So the tutorial ultimately should be setting people up to perform well within the game, which means that they should be engaging in those mechanics. In the tutorial funnel, you need to be focusing on the largest drop-offs. The tutorial funnel should be fairly smooth. So tutorial completion rate alone doesn't help. Looking at those other stuff will. Lastly, I hate tutorials that go too deep too fast. And maybe this is partly because I have the pleasure of working with a couple games that have really deep lore and a lot of fiction behind them. But we have to be sure to pace that out and pace out how we feed and how we introduce the player to that. Ultimately, you have 30 seconds to give me a reason to play another 30 seconds. Then you have a minute to give me a reason to play another minute. Then you have 3 minutes to give me a reason to come back for a second session, right? Which means that we have to take things each step along the way. Do this for 30 seconds, and this is why you're going to play the next 30 seconds. It's essential not to overwhelm the player. If you overwhelm the player, they'll just bounce right away. Ease them into the game. And that's everything that Aaron hates. Yeah, quick.
I'll just shout out, Aaron. Do you know any ad networks that allow you to optimize by publisher ID currently?
Some are definitely better. Like the ones that tend to have the direct relationship tend to do a lot better. Chartboost comes to mind right away. They tend to be really good about the relationship between the advertiser and publisher. Off the top of my head, I can't necessarily remember anyone specific otherwise. Yeah.
Hi, my question is, could you please summarize what you consider high quality traffic and how you determine that on per title basis?
Sure. High quality traffic is the traffic that generates the best KPIs within your game. And so ultimately everything comes down to LTV. LTV being lifetime value. That's nothing more than how much somebody spends per day and how many days they play, right? So ARPDAU times retention. So it all comes down to what is their retention and what is their monetization. And so the best quality traffic will have the best, those best numbers within your game. The worst quality traffic will typically have the worst numbers in the game. So in-send traffic will typically have horrible retention and just wretched monetization. So, and any other questions? Going once, going twice, and I think we're out of. Oh, one more question.
Do you actually do cohort analysis to see which users from what source are staying around? Are you actually?
So given that we don't have any games live internationally right now, from the mobile perspective, from the website perspective, absolutely. And yes, we are building out our systems to be able to do that. And a lot of that comes into working with the attribution partner, because that's partly what we're doing with the attribution partner, is be able to get those postbacks into our database so we can actually link up the advertising activity with the actual gameplay activity and see not only in terms of retention, or monetization, but also how many people did X action within the game. So the better data, more granular data we have, which is coming from the attribution partner, yeah, we're definitely optimizing based upon that. Cool. All right, I think I'm out of time. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun complaining.